Happy New Year and welcome to the Poetry Box Live. I'm Sean Aveningo Sanders, and I'm thrilled that you could join us for a little poetry today. For those of you who may be tuning into our show for the first time, my husband Robert and I run an independent press here in Portland, Oregon, known as the Poetry Box. And over the past 10 years, we've been lucky enough to collaborate with over 150 talented poets across the country to publish their books and chapbooks. Before we get started, I want to send out our love to everyone dealing with the catastrophic fires in Southern California and our huge gratitude to the brave firefighters tirelessly trying to save what and who they can. Our hearts go out to all of you. We've got another great show for you today featuring four amazing poets. We have David Goodrum joining us from Corvallis, Oregon. Penny Johnson will be sharing poems with us from Washington. Amy Baskin is joining us from here in Portland, Oregon. And SHAWN PITTARD will be reading to us from Sacramento, California. So let's get started with our first featured poet. David Goodrum is the author of Vitals and Other Signs of Life, his first full-length poetry collection released this past summer. David was born, raised, and educated in Indiana and currently enjoys life in Oregon's Willamette Valley. He holds degrees in English and German and a doctorate in instructional systems technology. David has been a high school teacher, a developer of software, a fine art photographer, and a director of educational technology at 2 universities. His poems have been published in Tar River Poetry, the Inflectionist Review, Fireweed Poetry of Oregon, Willawaw Journal, Scapegoat, and Triggerfish Critical Review, among others. His chapbook, Sparse Poetic, was published in 2023. He is currently the president of the Oregon Poetry Association and has served on the board of directors for the Arts Center in Corvallis since 2022. Please welcome David Goodrum.
Well, thank you, everyone. Yes, here's the cover of Vitals and Other Signs of Life, one of my own photographs used as the cover. Uh, Sean did a great job putting this book together and designing it. It's a wonderful design. I appreciate all their work. And it's so great to be invited to read at the Poetry Box and read with my fellow poets, especially Amy Baskin. Both of us are on the board of the Oregon Poetry Association. So this first poem, well, it's on page 52 if you've got your manual with you. And the first poem came about after a really long creative dry spell. And it's called Regression Progression. I am dreaming backwards to see where I thought I was headed. I am picking up what was dropped by my earlier self to dig into. What about me did I stop believing? Paused canvases, songless staffs and bars, faded image emulsions, and the parched waterfall of words detritus all. I stumble under the suspended toss-offs of a person who knew each moment better than the next. Well, we moved to Oregon uh, just a little over 8 years ago from Indiana, and you can take the boy out of Indiana, but you can't entirely take the Indiana out of the boy, and it's come out in a poem called "Flyover Country." At the Indiana lake, I would stare at the berthing of contrails by jets heading east to west, filled with passengers who would never set foot here. Hot gas extruding from engines into loose, watery strands of cirrus. I pictured the saddest people flying cross country, checking for exit paths, just in case. My brother looking up with me, struck by a golf ball soaring from across the field, a small purple globe rising from his forehead. In the middle of Indiana, I slept among the long dead and the always dying, on land once located near the equator and covered by an ancient shallow sea. Sedimental accumulations of the shells of marine vertebrates forming on the sea's bottom and compacting into a bedrock graveyard of limestone. Is the jet coming or going? Spengler, the historian, obsessed with decline, would assert it was coming from somewhere, and like me, going nowhere. Watching the jet trail and a second one, their reflections broken on the water by shifting winds, I hoped where the smooth, flat stones we toss and skim across the lake. I remember nodding off on summer nights as Dad drove us home, steering through the dark corn and soybean fields, swarms of insects splattering against the windshield, caught, surprised in mid flight, entrails smearing the view of the road ahead. So the next couple of poems express situations where one or another of my two brothers were in danger. Um, and the first one actually won a second prize in an Oregon poetry contest. And it's called My Middle Brother Bleeding. It's the second poem in the book. You catch your arm on a rusted bolt atop the neighbor's swing set, metal threads ripping wide open and to the bone the inside of your upper forearm. Somehow you raised yourself and loosened the hooked flesh, dash across backyards to reach home, blood spurting down to your wrist and hand. You forget to keep your open wound above the heart, but vaguely remember the advice not to swing until 30 minutes after eating. And don't try to fly on an empty stomach. You're so confused by astronomical facts. You shouldn't see other stars when the sun's out. Remember to bring a sweater to a planetarium. Heavenly bodies are closer than they appear. And the darkening space between you and the back door is a vacuum where you can't breathe, and the temp feels below zero. Standing frozen on the steps, your little brother, who, if you stopped to ask, would say, "Go get mom yourself," stares slack jawed at the boxy white ambulance racing away with you. And for years, at your Y shaped scar and the dried red drops patterned like constellations on the driveway. Thank you. This poem about my other brother. Well, there were two big hotel fires in the late 1980s. Um, one in Las Vegas, the other in Connecticut. And this was back when a lot of space was not required to have sprinklers. Those things that, because they're nationally required, we're so totally used to. But they didn't exist. And these two fires helped lead to eventual legislation. Now, this is called My Brother Jumped from the Fire. In the next room, 26 died. A half dozen groped the walls of a walk in closet, cul-de-sac, short hallway of panic. Another group piled up by the locked exit, searching for air pockets, tugging at the ties wrapped around their necks. But my brother knew he had to pick up the cleaning, felt for the stub in his coat pocket. knew he had to drive his daughter to flute practice, then to her candy striper meeting, then buy some groceries. He knew this weekend the garden had to be started, that he'd lead the singing in church on Sunday. In this room, they hurled a conference table at the window. It bounced back into their chests, stealing the breath from them. They heaved the table again, and my brother saw the slugs in the tilled ground waiting, could see the price on the canned corn, which brand, if he could only focus on the label. But the table came crashing back. When they tried again, he had to fight the urge to sit down and think it all over, while pulling the loose threads from his suit coat, smoothing the frayed cuffs of his trousers. He wanted to refold his handkerchief after wiping off his shoes, matching the creases he had ironed in. Instead, he coaxed the rough cartilage of his Achilles tendon, checked for his blood type. During the 3-story jump, the New England sky never looked so expansive. This motel never looked so tall. On the way down, he noticed the curtains needed cleaning and sheets were torn. The second floor room seemed half remodeled. Wallpaper strips curling down. He could almost smell the streaks and shadows of warming glue. When he passed the restaurant, he wondered if maybe no one liked the food. So much of it was left on the tables. I saw him that same day on the national news, flat on his back, guardrails on his bed. They told me later it was my brother. To me, he was some man interviewed after a fire. I barely paid attention to what he was saying. I concentrated on the point where his dark beard and his collar brace met, where his Adam's apple would be. And I was mesmerized by the watch, still on his wrist, the watch that had fascinated me when I was a boy because it was new and self-winding. So, after confronting a lot of mortality in my family, um, I in the second section of the book, I focus a lot on my own. And this one is called The Subtraction of Earthly Possessions. It's difficult to count down from an unknown number, though we all know that final digit. I'm placing my faith in Matthew's gospel. It's time to escape the threat of moths, rust, and thieves. My multiplying days are ending. Children, the method of my exhaustion. So I hand off intact china and leaded crystal, paintings and photos, neither faded nor modeled. Dig up treasures and burn secrets. Recycle an attic-filled collection of empty boxes. Sweep aside the exploded shards of tempered glass dishes thrown to the floor. Today, I donate suits, ties, and dress shoes, keeping t-shirts, sweatpants, slippers, and sandals. For as advised, always wear comfortable clothes when math has its foot on your neck. In a similar vein, most of us have been to the doctor maybe more than once, and they wanted to do some tests or more. And so this one is called Doctored Phrases. I fade in and out as she describes the shadows on static x-rays, the voyage of passing through my body 3D via MRI images, and the need for exploratory surgery. I peer through rain-slicked windows, a dim view of uninsulated pipes, ductwork, and heavy gauge wire. Everything that removes waste or bears energy, water, heat. I'll figure it out when I get in there, she says, like a poet unafraid of blank white sheets, a trembling body underneath. So a couple of poems, no one ever asked me for advice, so I have to give it in poems. And uh, so these are poems that, try to tell you what to do. And this first one is called Other Duties as Assigned. Hunt in the clear-cut, scorched hills with butter knife and blindfold. Farm in gravel. Barter with empty pockets. Beg for old age, fully aware of the fistfuls of dirt still to follow. Bake in the sand. Work eager bait onto the hook of being wrong about most things. And fish in self-deluded fog at the lake, restocked each day, where little white lies must be tossed back. And this last one is called Grave Digging Tips for Beginners. Don't wait for grief to thaw before excavation. Do wait until people are dead before burying them. Don't wait for the reading of the will. The financially crestfallen may be next. Before setting the headstone, double check the marker for correct dates. Life can't be extended, nor suffering cut short. You're assured some job security, but don't get cocky. Learn a second skill, like compressing ashes into gemstones. Hear the rustling leaves overhead? That's the sound of silent prayer. It's a simple one. Dig or be dug for. Wait for the grass to fill in. Always be careful where you step. Remember, the ground eventually settles for us all. Thank you very much.
What a profound ending to that set, David. You're such a great storyteller, and I really appreciate the honesty of your poems, and I love the way the way you sneak humor into your poems. It's really always surprising when that happens, and you kind of catch us off guard. So thank you for sharing these vibrant human poems with us today. It was a real pleasure to hear you. Next up, we have Penny Johnson, author of HAGS on Tractors, her memoir in poems that shows us what it means to be a rural woman grappling with the land. Penny lives at the base of a mountain with a horde of animals in central Washington. She and her horse run the farm. Her writing is visual and tactile. Penny has been a featured poet in literary reviews and a contender in Seattle poetry slams. She was a resident of Devereaux, received the BA from the Evergreen State College, and MFA from Goddard College. Her poems have been published in Bellowing Arc, Pawn to Infinity, Spectacles, Spillway, and most recently in Yakima Coffee House Poets, where she won the Tom Peer Prize. She's also a Pushcart Prize nominee and was an honorable mention in Cleaver, judged by Diana Seuss. It's my pleasure to welcome Penny Johnson.
Thank you. And thank you, Poetry Box. I'm not a chatty person. I have to tell you that. So I live out by myself, and I will just read you some poems if you don't mind. Okay. And I also can't see with my glasses on. These are tractor poems. I love these poems. New brand of syncopation. 1. 19 excuses not to walk into the shop of all men wafting diesel and the skin of their eyes puckered and sucked blind behind themselves. This resolute me walks in regardless with a forward tilt. 2. Skewered hot dogs, salt and grease, scrim of burnt coffee, powdered non-dairy creamer, and a cashier scanning prices. And now my own diesel treatment rocks on the counter and words pull like stretched toffee between us as he says, "You don't want, what do you run?" "It's not my car," I stammer. "It's for my tractor," I say with perfect elocution. 3A. Now, the next plunge into this downhill slope of misconception, but hold on. In this origami movement where cashier and I both know how carefully our paper is creased and what lines are splayed in this heartfelt soup of appropriation, or let it be skin to skin hand grasping. 3B. This is a simple weeknight soup of quartered zucchini, mince of rosemary, chop of chili, into which I promise to launch tiny dumplings so heavy they scud rock bottom. 4. So toothsome. 5. Crisp, no, flex your New Holland blue, this. You yourself a new line of skyline where I live cheap as thick porcelain, but you, my tractor, you ride unshackled, yet still you fire and die, and staggered with fear, hands empty, once again I am congealing into a thick white poultry gravy. 6. Every artery of me now flows with coagulated leftovers of my white-boned heritage, of my unconscionable expectations, of my inscrutable female gendered tenacity, a tenacity beyond belief. Even now, I release my breath, thin lips, silver whistle. I realign myself like pink silk within each exhale, and during the next inhalations, the black rose-grained ribbon of black holes cycles between us. This is our shared terra firma and our slewed sky of a silvered moon, sprinkled pinprick stars. 7A. Even this far along in my inner encyclopedia of a single roustabout, Palm's lifeline, an 8-legged arachnoid squirms down my cochlea, and still I pour more amber diesel anti-gel, and still I double back with both coral red hot water bottles whose faded rubber is now paled from their own viscous hot cherry beginnings. I press these warm bodies against this jello tank, praying it's your exact receptor on your lumbar spine. 7B. Mercy is all I have left to whisper. 8. And grip the very atom stunned and still, hold myself like ice trapped within its fall one more time for this new brand of syncopation as I say, please let me not misunderstand you. And of course, this cannot be what startles the orange spark. This is not what snaps both our joints to coordinate with your own steady thrumming, not what unpacks the both of us let loose now, free running within the shavings of our steaming breath. Oh, tractors. This is the book. And now I'm on page 14. And maybe everybody knows about pantoums, but in case you don't, there's repeated lines. Today when I was practicing it, all of a sudden I realized I thought it sounds just like rumination, where you keep going around and around and you can't get out of a thought. That's what this sounds like. It's called Never Safe. Plus all this chilly while my pasture gate springs unhinged, and this is my enunciation for a knotted gut to prop this inside corner up, 6-inch log of charred firewood. while wind whips 60 miles per hour, face square into shards of all my past in such tiny flakes. Oh man, so jagged edge stagger to steady, unyielding metal rungs, creak on ice before. My knotted gut, how to prop this corner up, at the very least prop of charred firewood, then the entirety jolts loose again. Listen, the key is always the inside corner heave. Jagged edge stagger to steady, unyielding metal rungs, crack of ice before it skewers, wavering against exact alignment, top to bottom, against all that solitary and howls. The entirety jolts loose again. Listen, the key is always this inside corner heave. Incoming night sucking marrow inside this bowl of solitary darkness stirs a syllabub. Skewer it in exact alignment, top to bottom, hinged against all that howls solitary. And despair shivers each talus, rails buck, uncorks every single knuckled carpal pop. Incoming sucking night marrow inside this bowl of solitary darkness, a syllabub, champagne to the point of pop top jolts, reckless dive. Who do you think, whose despair that shivers each talus, rails buck, unknuckled, every single brittle carpal pop? You are, huh? Shouts each past husband opaque in their march up from the barn. Champagne at the point of pop top jolts, a reckless dive. Who do you think? Damn, such slick smiles. Who do you think you are? Asked my father. My mother bared. Who do you think you are? Demands each past husband opaque, marching, malingering. Teeth in my mother's skull. I could never keep her safe. I tried, but stopped. Loose and such slick smiles. Who do you think you are? Demands my father. My mother bears uncountable losses while I carry lead ropes, both hands as if the loose limbs of long gone, teeth in my mother's skull as if I could ever keep her safe. Just stop now, cut loose the baby. Listen, we used to know the songs, remember? We used to sing the words. These losses, carry lead ropes in my own two hands, carried like loose-limbed, long gone, and I am so sorry, I say, as I clip the maroon to the scarlet, to the black, and finally speckled blue. The baby's gone. We used to know the songs, remember? We used to sing the words. This gate, wrangle the fucking thing, beat it into simple submission, past corrosion, and I am so sorry, I say, as I clip the maroon to scarlet to black, and finally speckled blue. Husbands whip like crabbed brown leaves back inside the barn. My father, mother, curd inside this gate. Wrangle the fucking thing, beat it into a simple submission of the past, shrinks like snails inside my pancreas. Tie these lines across all this vacant space. How? As husbands whip like crab-dead leaves back inside the barn, my father, mother, curd from a closeted clot of obscenities. It is closed. Now my mare will be safe as wind sucks. Back, shrunk like snails inside my pancreas, crosshair lines across the vacant space. How? In polished moon, horizon, this annunciation by clouds steamed in a mole of chili red sauce. Phew. Okay, and this is much lighter. This is another tractor poem, and it is my favorite tractor poem. Life has got a lot to do with tractors where I live. It's called Like a Matriarchal Elephant, and it is on page 7. Look, there is no one here. There is never anyone else here. This stream of damp musk, sawdust, and beige mushroom. Look, this metered gauge where now the needle joists, it skews my lassitude, my fortitude, and then a single gasp of hyperventilation. 2. One morning I bought it new, off the ship, off the docks, from another land, coaxed it home in all its enamel and cobalt blue. Non-necrotic, scratch resistant, non-sclerotic, and felted in black hydraulic lines, like an elephant's trunk. The nimble wrap, the twist, reaching, tractor survive an expanse of time like all the other matriarchs. 3. Remember to stretch forward from the waist, palm open, clasp this new vocabulary with its array of tiger orange and lapis lazuli, knobs, clicker right, clicker left. Oh Lord, see, it is fanning its giant ears as if they flap in warning, and this sprig of a tail its own hygienic 3-point hitch, gargled growl of its power takeoff. 4. Watch as I swing wide the maw, the tusk, the teeth, barely missing my own roofline, all in practice to tilt this black bucket just so, back blade just above the crushed gravel, and even now, look, it carries me. We working in tandem, we as the neighbors drive by one after the other, white pickup with a blue handicap sticker, gray pearl pickup, 3 black pickups in a drawn out row. Don't look, I say, and squint my eyes. 5. Those neighbors, those same pickups, they lean out their windows, lean into the nubs of their elbows on their window frames. They will gawk. They will turn to their passenger and say she doesn't know what she is getting into. She won't make it through the first winter. 6A, they will laugh. 6B, they have always laughed, but it is my ribs that hurt from all their laughing. 7. Tonight, I brew the soup of vermilion tomatoes plucked out of frost, whose cracks are barely sealed over with opaque filament. This glue. Stir the pot and dabble in a wide expanse of gray sage, the needle nose of evergreen rosemary. As the crescent moon rises, I will bury the paper white garlic, the red fall potatoes deep in each earth that lies in the sparkle of its own ice crystals. 8. Plant for spring. 9. And don't even think to ask how strong this elephant is. Not with these solid state cotter pins, these chrome sway bars, this howdah rides high and slides within an endless luxury of lube. Black and braided, both split brake pedals cut my soles. Oh Lord, look, it spins on a dime. This new realm that shimmies in blue. And then I'm just gonna end if I can find it, on a short one. It's called, it has good memories. It's called Upper P.O. Fire Lookout. Horses' dark manes snarl into wicky-up brush while our own gray bone fingers meld and crisscross, pluck at a melanoma snap, breath even, so resilient, a resilience to my own ivory hair's Hiroshima crown. Dreadlocked, your steel blue, rib-eyed from behind, and this year's green Timothy bagged hangs high-lined within a soft sift of black pine boughs. Cloud whip frost moon rises even while sighing that nothing is truly ever all this crisp and pearly white except snowflakes spattering in a flurry untethered on ice black horse fur. Do you even remember pale half moons and pink shell fingernails? Now our fungus horn toads collude with pine needles and earth. That's it. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Penny. You know, when you sent me this collection, you totally had me with that title, Hags on Tractors. And then the way you make that tractor come to life as this matriarchal elephant, it's just fantastic. I really enjoyed this collection, and I really want to thank you for sharing these rich, earthy stories with us today. Next up, we have Amy Baskin, author of Skull, which was a finalist in our annual chapbook contest last year. Amy is a Pushcart Prize and Best of the Net nominee, an Oregon Literary Arts Fellow, and an Oregon Poetry Association Prize winner. Her work can be found in anthologies and journals including The Hocus Tarot, Pyrene's Fountain, Friends Journal, and Swim. When not writing, she works for the Department of English and History at Lewis and Clark College and helps run literary arts programs, including Fur Acres Writing Workshop. Her previous collections include Hysterical Cake from Dancing Girl Press and Night Hag from Unsolicited Press. It's my pleasure to welcome Amy Baskin.
Thank you, Shawn. It's my pleasure to be here with you all, and I'm so grateful that you and Robert published my book. It's entitled Skull. It just came out on December 15th. And Robert, Shawn, and my husband Jason worked on the cover together and the layout. It's beautiful. I also want to thank Kashiana Singh, who's here with us tonight, for giving me a beautiful blurb and taking time to be a poetry sister for me and for everyone showing up, and to my father for showing up as well tonight. I really appreciate that. This book, this collection, I submitted because of a fellow pressmate, Zaina Azam, who said she had a great experience here, and she's a good friend of Kashiana's and mine. So I'm so glad that I did, and I've loved a lot of other collections of people's, of course. So I'll read a few short ones and then leave the rest of my time. I'll start with the first one and just let you know that I call this collection, the logline is Skull is a collection that I wrote while concussed. I suffered what was called an MTBI, a minor traumatic brain injury, during what seemed like a very minor T-bone of our car. And my father was a passenger, and I saw the car coming. It looked like it was going to hit him in the side or my daughter, who was in the back seat on the right side. And I think that wasn't a great thing for my neck and the tension and the quick calculation that happened in my head when I swerved to brake. So I'll read you the first poem. It's called Unseated, and I think it's the first poem that I wrote after the accident. Unseated, and the epigram is a view from an impairment. What do I need to do now? Where is the glove composite, compostment, department, the grill, the hood, the bumper look like a music machine? What's it called? It's an armament, no, instructment, musical fold. Head rests on the seat, shock through my arms, trunk, legs, slows at my neck. Fuel is leaking from me. A slow drip under the mind. My engine is unseated. It lost its upgrade. Help me. I am off. I was here, and now I'm here. Let me just think for a minute. Think for a minute. I think, can I think? Is this thinking? Start the thing. Move the accordion. See my face and body. Exit the driver door. Not a scrape, bruise, or break. What did that other driver just say? I'm glad you're okay. Kind of how it sounded at the time in my head. That's number one. Thank you. There was a lot going on in my mind in that little small bit, and a lot going on in my body. I found out later, trauma is an interesting thing because you can sublimate trauma and push it down for quite a while, and then you can sustain an injury and other things come up. One of which was my sister, Sally McBride, who died a few weeks before my husband, Jason, and I got married. She was killed in a car crash in a DUI. And that's always in me, but it was certainly in me at that moment. So this one is called What I Know Every Time We Get Behind the Wheel, to my sister who wasn't as lucky. Stars tunnel, vision to black. Heads don't even need to hit dashboards. The adverse ramming his SUV into the passenger side. Once, heart pulsed in belly. Now liquid spurts from tailpipe, windows, veins, and eyes. I am here because 2 kids made the drive back from Pikes Peak with a wine-stained picnic blanket and blood alcohol content. I was handed my own set of car keys when I turned 16, before I had even changed out of my PJs. At some church, a lilac tree is forever planted in your name. By the Flatirons, we dressed a bench with a plaque before you had even graduated. I love cars. Can you tell? I also want to say that this book is dedicated to my healthcare providers, some of whom I still am working with, and the crash happened in spring of 2017. So that was 2 presidential terms ago. How about that? So I just want to give a nod to Susan Buckert-Burke, Dr. Maxon Lee, Chrysia Kingsbury, Dr. Heidi Olenek, Kurt Marion, and Lynn Emmons, people that have taken care of my health very well, and then to all my family and loved ones who always take care of it too. This one is a formalist poem. And I don't know if some of you might be familiar with one of my favorite books as a child, and it still remains one of my favorite books, A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And I used to identify, oh, good, I see some hands going up. Can you show me some hands? Do you know the book? Okay, good. All right, I feel confident reading this then. So I grew up wishing, like when I was a kid, I wanted to be Meg Murray. I was Meg Murray when I read the book. She's our protagonist who saves her father, has to go on a space-time adventure to save her father from a dark thing called it. And she also ends up having to save her beautiful younger brother. So that holds a place in my heart, caring after a sibling and being concerned. And at one point in the story, she gets injured herself, and someone she's never met takes care of her. So now as I'm aging, I'm less Meg, and I really am aspiring to be Aunt Beast. So the title of the poem is Aunt Beast, with the epigram, life with its rules, its obligations, and its freedoms is like a sonnet. You're given the form, but you have to write the sonnet yourself. Mrs. Wetsit says that in A Wrinkle in Time by Madeleine L'Engle. And this is in the voice of Meg. You found me hurt. You drew me to your chest and saw me as I was, though you are blind. You covered me in fur and gave me rest. My body, hard as stone, sensed you were kind. You spoke through tentacles that held my cheek, relaxed the frigid stiffness of my fear, and though my father thinks I am too weak, I have to rescue Charles. To us, it's clear. Your music taught me grace, and I won't quit. I'll live this love more tangible than form and rescue my dear Charles from that thief, it. Your song emboldens me to face this storm. You know the black thing burns and how we grieve. Goodbye, Aunt Beast. Now, sing me how to leave. I think we all need to know how to leave and sing and go forth these days. And so I'm always in search. Mr. Rogers says, look for the helpers. I look for the Aunt Beasts out there. Let's see. I'll lighten it up a little bit because Why not? I was still being treated during 2020, 2021, 2022. And of course, I was treated for other things too and went for my usual medical exams. So this one is called Breast Exam During the Pandemic. Wasn't treated for loneliness, though, the same way that, you know, all of us weren't treated for that at the time if we experienced it. Breast exam during the pandemic. Some years I joke with my doctor about the intimacy of the act. Are those your cold, palpating hands, or are you just happy to feel me? Sometimes the intimacy of the act is no joke when she says my breasts are fibrous and uncooperative. This year, the intimacy of the act is not buffered by blue comedy or exposed to threatening news. It's just that over the past year, she's the first person out of my household who has touched me. And I'll leave enough time. One more poem, sorry, very quickly. And this one, my son's a wildland firefighter who is, for me, thankfully not on duty right now. He's back at school, but this was written during the pandemic while I was being treated too, and it's called Desiccant. You know those little things you put in a jar to keep your pills dry, or somebody does. Kind of what I felt like, and maybe some of you can relate during other climate fires we've experienced here in Portland and beyond. So this one goes out to my loved ones in LA and Eagle Rock right now who have their bags packed. Desiccant. Epigram, Climate Fires 2020, Air Quality Index 450, Portland, Oregon. Shove my body in a bottle. I'll keep your drugs dry. Dehydrated jerky, unused kitchen sponge, depleted, drained in a corner, waiting for rain, waiting for the wash away. When will we reckon with the wreckage, the wasteland outside our door? Thank you.
Oh, Amy, that was emotional. You know, these poems in Skull, they grab us right out of the gate, as you did with this reading today. That first poem, my goodness. You really have a way of taking us in such a tactile way into your experience so that we can really almost feel, you know, what you went through as you were pushing through this trauma. And you know, which isn't that the job of every poet, you know, to bring forth a new understanding for all of us, to broaden our empathy. So I just have to say bravo, Amy, bravo.
Thank you so much.
Our final featured poet today is SHAWN PITTARD, author of Witness, which was also a finalist in our annual chapbooks last year. SHAWN is also the author of two other collections of poetry, Standing in the River, that won the Tebow Box Clockwise Chapbook competition in 2010, and These Rivers from Rattlesnake Press. He's been a coach for Poetry Out Loud and a California Poet in the Schools. SHAWN taught recitation and writing in middle schools and high schools, in Juby Hall, as well as with veterans and the men in Folsom Prison. By day, he labored in the field of environmental protection, planning, and public policy, focusing on energy. It's my pleasure to introduce SHAWN PITTARD.
Thank you, SHAWN. Thank you very much. What a pleasure to be here. It's always fun to go to a good reading. So thanks to the poets for the reading tonight. I'm going to show off my book. Thank you, SHAWN. Thank you, Robert, for making a beautiful book for me. I couldn't believe it when they showed up at my doorstep and I opened the box. I went, oh man, these are nice. This is beautiful stuff. And Robert made cover art out of a photo I'd taken of my mother's hands. It was really great to go from a photo to cover art. Pretty cool. So the book is titled Witness, and I'll start by reading the title poem, which is the first poem in the collection. Witness. My father knows something I don't, has seen something I haven't, been somewhere I have yet to go. When he returned, his brown eyes were blue-gray. He looks at me from that distant place he visited. Its gravity holds him between the place where we talk and the place where he was taken by the stroke. He has important things to tell me through the grip of his one good hand. Stories I must not forget. The boy left standing beside his mother in the wheat field during harvest after she collapsed under the weight of the sun. The boy who spent an hour tying and retying his necktie before going into town to see a movie with his cousins. The boy collecting payment on his paper route, a handful of loose change thrown into his face. My father witnessed my birth. I am witnessing his death. We have something we must say. All right, this poem is called Winter's Hope. Our fathers are dying. My mother saw her father's spirit rise up and out of his dead body. I hoped for something similar during the long hours of my father's death. Death is everywhere today. The birds are here to feast on it. Trees bend under the weight of vultures, black wings stretched against the burnt orange leaves of fall, as spawned out salmon drift downstream, and the still living, on their upstream mission to procreate, dart urgently past my ankles. So my mom and dad were very young when they got together and created me. So I'll talk a little bit about these young people here. What the waves know. My mother was a lifeguard. She taught her children how to swim. She turned 19 the day before I was born. She talks about young love while we watch the North Coast waves crash against the sea bluff. 18 and pregnant, playing in the surf with my dad. Mom jokes about me body surfing while still in the womb. I tell her that I miss my dad. She says, I miss my husband. Of the ocean, she says, it just is, just is. The waves know there is nothing to become. We are all complete. Nothing is missing. One day, I will return to the sea. It would take me now were I to wade into its cold embrace. Take me now or take me later, it doesn't care. How is it I come to rest in the presence of such relentless indifference? If I ever grow old, I want to fall asleep to the music of breaking waves. I would like for that to be the last sound I hear. So if you have a book, I'm off to page 14. I'm just going to hop and skip chronologically. And there's a little story arc here that will fall. So page 14, another fawn. This one dead in the thin grass and late autumn leaves, on the bank beside the river named for the Father, Son, and Holy Ghost. An incantation I whisper 3 times into its left ear, anticipating life will spring back into its slender body, and it will wobble up onto its unsteady legs the way it did when it was first born. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. The water is alive with salmon and the rush of winter. I touch the fawn's bony chest the way I touched my father's during the hours of his death. Has he risen up, steadying himself somewhere on the other side of the river? So the title of this next poem is inspired by Frank O'Hara, and inspired by the way a critic had described Frank O'Hara's poems. He called them "we do this, we do that" poems. So I was with my wife, caregiver for my mother for 4 years. And we did this and that a lot. And so when I read about this idea of a we do this, we do that poem, I said, oh, I can write one of those. So here we go. It took a while, but we're comfortable now with my helping her with her shower. We're past the self-conscious joking. We focus on the pleasures of hot water, shampoo, and a bath sponge. We take the time to scramble eggs with Parmesan, salt, and pepper. Spend the rest of the morning cleaning up the kitchen. Some days we go out to the wildlife area with our binoculars and a couple of drive-through sodas, listening to rock and roll. Mark Knopfler is a favorite, but Elvis is the king. During late afternoons, we tally up the living and the dead. A younger brother living and retired to the Philippines. 2 of her big sister's 3 sons still alive. Among the dead, her parents, her husband of 62 years. She says, I'm your mother? Yes, I'm your son. But you're so old. That just totally cracked me up when she said that. All right, the next poem is titled, Since Your Death. The round song of the horned owl is no longer an omen. I've stopped waking to the least sound downstairs. I listen for the night train now, to the wind rustling crepe myrtle blossoms, watch for the new moon. Maybe I am lonely, open in this moment to the mystery, vulnerable to its charms. Sometimes we need a divine ear that we can whisper into. All right, this poem is called I'm Thinking About Death. There's a lot of that in this book. I'm thinking about death. Not my death or your death, not even my mother's death in my very arms, but death itself. That voyeur always lurking, time bomb in the heart, seed of cancer in the sunburned nose, patient opportunist who I sometimes see in the beaks of vultures perched in the riverbank trees, or the angels etched into the frieze at the cathedral. Is it death who whispers, slow down, when you should know that there are deer on the forest road this time of night? Or says, go for it, when you look into the black water from the jumping rock above the bridge? Thank you. These little thumbnails, or whatever we call them, are so cool. They just crack me up. And just thank you so much for applauding with your hands. It's kind of a beautiful thing. All right, the last poem I'll read is the last poem in the collection, and it's called Goodnight, Love. I say goodnight to the moon because you do not lie beside me, to the North Star, Orion's sparkling belt. Good night to the street light, the lock on the back door that I check twice. Good night, love. I say to the place in my heart where I carry you. Good night, love. I will rest with you one day. Thank you all very much.
Ooh, Shawn, that is such a heartbreaking collection, but in the most beautiful way. You know, most of us will, if we haven't already, face the grief of losing our parents, and your care, not only in taking care of your parents, but in writing these poems is it's just a true gift to all of us. I really want to thank you for sharing these beautiful, beautiful poems with us today. Thank you. Whew. Well, let's have a giant round of applause for all of our readers today. I'd like to thank our 4 talented poets, David Goodrum, Penny Johnson, Amy Baskin, and SHAWN Pittard. And thank you, our audience, for supporting our authors and joining us for another edition of the Poetry Box Live. Our next show will be Saturday, February 8th, celebrating the winners of our 2024 chapbook contest, Mark Lupinetti, Laura Foley, and Allison Thorpe, with special guest poet Donna Hilbert. So I hope you will join us for what will be a very special show. And for all of you poets in the audience, the Poetry Box Chapbook Prize will be open for submissions again on February 1st. And our guest judge this year is one of my favorite poets, George Bilger. You can find all the details on our website, thepoetrybox.com. And while you're there, feel free to subscribe to our newsletter. There's a sign-up form at the bottom of each webpage. Thanks again for joining us today. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend. Good night.